I wanted to, start by just saying that, as a learner myself, growing up in school, my experience, was around not thinking in parts, and this idea that, we are also sort of busy thinking about a subject that I need to master or a particular skill that I want to build, and we are also busy perfecting these different parts that we are taught in schools, that we sometimes forget that whole, and how do we really build that pathway to navigate the future, and what does that whole really look like? I think the last year for Quest has been about trying to even make sense of the organization as a whole, because oftentimes we, in organizations, in our institutions, also work in these different parts, and just bringing this whole together has been something we've been preparing for, and that's something that we feel that will really get us ready to not just navigate us or ourselves, our own journeys into this, into the future, but also get young people to really look at their lives as this whole, and really help them navigate their transitions from school to work. And I think that's what we really want to talk about in the next few, in the next 2 days, is really what are the trends that are affecting young people as they navigate their lives across from school to work, and what are we seeing, what are we learning, and what can we really do about that. So we're going to talk about 6 trends that we see affecting school to work transitions. And the first one, and no guesses for that, is really how the system is really not aligned, and how there are so many different voices, so many different people in this system that are really pushing and pulling the influence that education that they have, and that, to me, is just about spending time in aligning objectives, spending time together. There are 1 million schools, or more than 1 million schools, and it's hard to run a complex system like that. So it's not very easy. So for us to say it's misaligned, but even our organizations are misaligned oftentimes. And how do you really align such large complex systems? So that's really the first thing we are seeing. And if you see, I can tell you a story from my visit to Samastipur a few months back, where I was spending time with the block education officer, and the block education officer was really in the middle of that conversation. There were calls that he was getting from someone, and that block education, and this was a young person who he was trying to track down, because the government had announced a scheme where unemployed youth will get a small pocket money, and he was trying to see if he was really unemployed, and he was spending time tracking through different sources whether he was actually employed but was calling for that to claim that government scheme. So oftentimes a lot of time goes just into for leaders in these complex systems to just manage these different interests of all these different stakeholders, and the time that should go into discussing learning, into discussing what should happen in the classroom, is oftentimes very limited for both the teacher, for the learners to engage in that learning process. And I think that's sort of, and there is a dire need for some kind of facilitation, which places like the World Bank or other institutions are really trying to provide, as how do you really bring a lot of these stakeholders together. So that's really the first thing that we are seeing in terms of system thinking that needs to be brought into the sector. The second trend we are really seeing is around what happens, because of what's happening in the larger system, there is a huge trust deficit that is there between teachers, parents, and students. And there's a constant blame game that happens about who is responsible for good education. And what we are seeing as a result is a huge enrollment in private schools that's happening, and people just believe that private schools will be the answer to the challenges, but it's really each one playing a part. It's the parent asking those critical questions at home. It's the teacher that's really providing that space for young people and learners who are also taking charge of that learning. So I think that's something we are seeing continuously in schools about how there is this limited trust that we are not able to overcome. The third one is really something that a lot of you may be familiar with, around just the aspirations of young people and what do they really want from their lives. We are seeing that, a lot of them are still aspiring for government jobs. We are seeing that they are spending a good part of their youth just studying to get certificates and degrees, and necessarily not looking at what are the opportunities out there that they can start engaging with, whether it's in the local communities, whether it is in different spaces that exist. So that's one piece from a youth perspective. They also have access to more information, and that means that they are just aspiring for a better life faster than really taking those smaller steps. At the same time, we are really seeing new opportunities come up for young people as well, and how do this matching of youth interests and abilities happen with the opportunities that are available locally. The other one is really the disappointments and some successes that women are facing in the workplace. One of the things someone told me recently is just that that it's all about getting the girl married is really the core focus. The focus is, okay, we'll finish education, get her married. There's no aspiration that the community has. There is no aspiration that they have limited opportunities to dream about what they want to do beyond finishing education. And while new opportunities are opening up, the marriage economy still is the dominant sort of narrative that goes on in most families and societies. And how do we really create role models for more girls to participate meaningfully in the workplace. And we'll discuss a lot more about what work and what kind of work opportunities exist for girls. This one, I think, the traditional notion of livelihood is really based on the agrarian sort of thinking about how self, family, career, and community, how there is this interconnectedness in all of these four different aspects. And as more migration is taking place, as people are moving from rural areas to cities, or maybe in between, that peri-urban areas, as we call them, this notion of what does livelihood mean now for them is something that we are struggling to also answer, that what is that interconnectedness between these four dimensions that we need to explore. What are those alternatives? And this is something which, I was in Gujarat last week and talking to what are the kind of support systems young people have as they do this migration, and what can we do to really provide that ongoing support is a question that we are hearing from partners, from our own interactions with people. And I think the final big one is really around the promise and fear of digital. And I think all of us are experiencing that in multiple different ways, in terms of just this divide that's getting created between parents and and children as well about what is safe, what is unsafe, what are the opportunities that digital provides. And digital, to start with, is really the mobile, but there is a lot more to digital, as we know, a whole digital life and a whole digital lifestyle that's coming in, and how do we really navigate that is a trend. And I think how do we transform how do we balance actually this whole erosion of family values versus the opportunity that the market is providing? I think that's where digital is the balance that we are trying to see. So the 6 trends that we are seeing around work now in terms of what are the opportunities for young people to get engaged in meaningful work. There are, the first one that we've seen is really around, there has been jobless growth, right? So we've seen that a lot of self-employment, which was on the rise, is actually declining as well. We've seen casual labor go up significantly, and this formal jobs hasn't really significantly grown. So, 5 million people are entering the workforce every year, but there are probably 1 million to 2 million jobs that are being created. And that's something that we are really looking at. From a data perspective, we saw that there were 30% of the total young people out of jobs or schools in 2016. So that's a huge number for us to even make sense out of. That what does it mean to them? What does it mean to that individual to not be engaged meaningfully in anything? The second trend we are seeing is this whole growth of digital platforms and how that's really organizing the unorganized sector. So what that really means is that while jobs are not increasing, India is primarily an informal market. 80% or more are informal. Now the digital economy is actually making that informal the norm, which means most people will continue to be part of the informal economy, and there'll be a very there'll be a way to organize that informal market a lot more. And what does that mean in terms of social security for people, in terms of long-term employment opportunities? What does that mean in terms of the skills and aptitudes that people need to have to succeed in that informal economy that's being created because of the platform, is something that we really need to think about, because while that might be a huge opportunity for people in the West, it's actually going to perpetuate what's already happening here, and really going to take on more of the informalization that's going to continue. So the third one we are seeing is around sort of the differentiated challenges that girls will face. So what we are seeing is that a lot of the entry-level jobs which girls are involved with are going to reduce in the next 3 to 4 years. These are BPO jobs, and there are new jobs that are being created for women and girls around the platform economy as well. But right now, only 28% girls own or women own mobiles, as compared to 45% men who own mobile phones. They are right now 59% of the labor force, which is largely due to the agriculture economy where they do jobs. Now there, as well as, I read somewhere that there's going to be 1 million jobs that will be going away, and a lot of them are to do with what girls are involved with right now. So what does that mean in terms of upskilling and reskilling, and access and affordability to technology and so on? The fourth trend we are seeing around the manufacturing sector, which is really that this graph really shows that there is high automation potential across sectors, be it agriculture, retail, manufacturing, accommodation, and food services. But that does not necessarily mean that there will be high adoption of, of technology very soon, because there is a huge cost to changing and becoming technology-based industries. So it's not going to immediately change the tech landscape is not going to immediately affect these different sectors, but they do have high automation potential. They're going to be more digital literacy and more digital fluency that will be needed to also be able to take some of these jobs, which could be basic data analytics or other things. So I think that's the next piece, which is really the tasks are changing. So, a bank teller's job, which was to distribute cash, changed when the ATMs came in and you suddenly had relationship managers as opposed to bank tellers. Now, those kind of task transitions will happen in other sectors as well, whether it's travel, whether it's sales, marketing, or other industries. And what that will mean is how will these young people be able to provide that customer-oriented attitudes and skills to be able to do these jobs, and also use, again, data to make sense out of what customers want, to be able to understand their preferences, and so on. So I think that's another thing we are anticipating, is that the tasks will change. The jobs will not go away from these sectors immediately. So these task transitions is what we need to keep in mind as we design skills and curriculum and training programs as well for young people. And finally, what a lot of experts are calling the care economy, where young people jobs that require caring for others. Now, whether these are teachers, these are healthcare professionals, these are people who are entering the service sector, but very specific areas in the service sectors. For example, storage enterprises is a big one, that more jobs will get created as opposed to what has been the norm. And we are looking to see the 3 to 3.5 million jobs a year being added in some of these sectors. And that's going to be a huge opportunity. We are already seeing, young girls, for example, aspiring to be teachers in a lot of rural areas, or join the development sector. Those are the two opportunities that they see most of. And I think this is something that we are also looking at, how these courses are getting introduced in a lot of the work that we do with partners as well. So in all of this, I think we are really asking ourselves, what does it mean for learning ecosystems, or for different contexts, whether it's schools, whether it's NGOs, whether it's ITIs who are running these different skills programs. What does it really mean for us, given all of this is happening, and given we are experiencing this change? So the first thing we are really saying in terms of an implication for a learning ecosystem is really, how do we build a mindset of growth? How do we get young people to understand also development? What I was talking about, the idea of self, family, career, community. How do we get young people to start planning better and having a career mindset, which is this whole idea of desire to learn, as well as their capability to learn, right? And how do we, what gives that desire, that motivation, and what gives them the capacity? And that's something that we feel, just understanding what it takes to navigate a career and a career navigation process is something that can offer young people that option of, how do I make sense out of where I am, and how do I really, this is a framework we use around understanding self, exploring the world of work, identifying career opportunities, and planning your career. And that continuous process is what we are leaving young people with, so that they can continuously get an overall understanding of navigating this. The second implication I think we are seeing around the educator networks. We've spent a lot of time talking to educators from diverse contexts, and what we are seeing is that educators have solutions and they can offer those solutions to each other. With a little bit of training and focusing on themselves and bringing themselves to their classrooms, and not just focusing on what to teach and how to teach, we are able to build that need for them being part of a community. And we feel that the educator networks will seed that culture of change. And it's not just individual educators. It's really big, growing them into a larger collective. That's the linked. The third piece around that is just making sense out of this information age and just being able to distill information. And we saw that schools in Kerala are actually rolling out a curriculum which helps young people make sense out of fake news, and being able to think about what is true, what is not. That itself is a skill that we feel young people need to learn. And that's a conversation we were also having around our table about, it starts from school. It starts from, someone just spreading rumors for fun, and that becomes a huge spiral in various ways, in various platforms. The fourth area, from a learning ecosystem point of view, we feel is the whole digital literacy to digital mastery piece. And while literacy can be everything from connecting to the internet, skills to search, skills to make a digital identity, it's really the digital fluency that today it's merging, right? The digital skills and career skills are merging to be in the same bucket, which means that salesperson also needs to know data analytics or operate that POS machine. And we need to really look at the integration of digital into career skills as well, and not look at sort of vocation in isolation of digital. And therefore, we are seeing it as a funnel, which means that there are many people who will learn digital literacy, but there need to be still a significant number of people who need to be digitally fluent. And maybe some who will be the masters and be the role models, but we really need to focus on this middle bucket as we get the young people to transition. The fifth one, which kind of I spoke about earlier, is that systems change will be possible only through this interconnected whole, and how we think in wholes for the system. And really, there are so many different strands that this whole system has, right from what's the vision I have for the learner, to tracking, to community engagement, to having a learner focus, to the leadership having the capacity to really have a full view of this system. And we really need to think about who's really facilitating this process of bringing all these different tracks together, and seeing how we are facilitating multiple actors really converge around these different things. A lot of organizations, NGOs, companies have parts to offer in this larger continuum or this larger system, but someone needs to be facilitating this process and bringing people together to make sense out of. And I think the final one is really, what's the vision we have for our learners, and what do we really understand as the core objective of education and learning in our skill space. And we feel that has to be that the learner has to have an autonomous role eventually. They have to be their own self, and they have to be their whole self. But that's going to be a journey to get them there. It's not that we can aim for a lifelong learner without getting them a set of experiences that they can navigate through. So the first piece that we are really talking about is self-regulated learning, where you are working with a younger learner, where they have access to learning through a formal institute. There is a role of a teacher who is really creating the framework for this learning, and there is a process where they're really giving control within a framework to a learner to navigate their path. But the teacher is still playing a big role in doing this. The next step we are calling the self-directed learner, or the self-directed learning process, where we are seeing that there are older learners who access learning through both formal and informal means, who understand their learning styles as well. So they are more aware of their learning. The teacher can be a mentor, the teacher can be the facilitator, but they are really trying to give more control there to the learner. And in that, we are seeing that the process is really the learner defines the learning task. The learner has clarity on the direction of the learning goal. So that question of why am I doing what I'm doing, the learner is a lot more confident of, which means, are we really giving them knowledge about the career paths, career knowledge, and being able to then help them set those goals, and which will hopefully transition us into the end goal about around lifelong learning, where they are really connected with each other, and the facilitator is more of a mentor. So, yeah, that's really, I think, the thought around, as organizations, as leaders, do we have this vision for our learner? Do we see them as lifelong learners? Do we see our role as shaping them to get there? And how do we really create that path for them? And so just a little bit about Quest in this context. We've really focused our efforts in the last 12 years around innovation and collaboration with multiple actors in the system, really working with state governments, NGOs, funders, in schools, in ITIs, NGOs, various different contexts, and focus on really sort of demonstrating some scale-up models in these different contexts that develop 21st century skills, where we can learn from these efforts and really advocate for what are some of the priorities that we need to be investing in when it comes to school to work transition. We've had multiple experiments, but now it's really time to focus on the research and advocacy piece, as we are learning more and more through partners, through different people we work with. And so in the last year, we reached out to different 200,000 learners in multiple different ecosystems. We've built these partnerships over a long period of time. You'll hear some of them today. And really trying to see if we can really start learning with all of these stakeholders over the next few years. And therefore, our next 5 years, we really see ourselves reaching out to 5 million learners and facilitators, and really engaging and strengthening different ecosystems through education, technology, innovation, collaboration with these different partners we've been working with. You're familiar with the two sort of strong programs that we've been working on, one around dropout prevention and creating joyful spaces, the other around career development for youth using technology. That would continue to stay a big focus for the next 5 years. We've also looked at a few additions to how we look at our work, which is to scale our impact beyond these networks. So we have now a dedicated and a fairly strong technology team that's working on building a product that can be used by anyone in the learning space. We are looking to grow our Master Coach program, which is focused on building educator capacity. We've added a new program around leadership development for community leaders, for NGO leaders, that'll be able to take the self-learning thinking, self-learning vision, and building learning organizations, and really infuse the system with this kind of mindset of change and thinking about change, because that's the biggest barrier to really integrating technology in a meaningful way, and in not just technology, but also self-learning in a meaningful way. And finally, the knowledge hub, which really brings the learnings from the community and shares it back, and really co-creates that. So our commitment is really to integrate self-learning into various ecosystems we work with, facilitate approaches to scaling our impact with our partners, and really advocate for learning organizations to be to start building their own theories around self-learning and thinking about what it means to be a learning organization.